minimize those harms of the past to our Indigenous people. And I want to introduce our panelists. We're very fortunate to have some amazing people today to come and share their experiences. I will be the moderator, so I'll be asking the questions, probably because I can't help myself, jumping in with some thoughts of my own along the way. And then I'm Dr. Manuel Ester, who is a physical activity specialist and works closely with rheumatologists from the University of Calgary. Dr. Allyson Jones, who's a physiotherapist and a professor at the University of Alberta. Therese Lane, who's a person living with arthritis and chronic pain. Carole Silvera, also a person living with rheumatoid arthritis. And Louise Crane, who's a person living with arthritis and lupus. And hopefully will bring us some of the Indigenous perspectives that I know she knows so well. So we're just really happy that they could all join us today. And maybe we'll start off with a couple of questions for our people with lived experience. So I'm going to pick on Therese first, and then maybe Carole can jump in, and then Louise. So I want to just kind of ask a question. I know you all, because you've shared with me that you really benefit from exercise, as I have physical activity. And I just want to know, Therese, how did you get started exercising? What motivated you and got you moving?
Well, it was actually a fortunate accident, really, that I got moving and found out the benefits of it. I had basically lived a sedentary life. I'd had pain and arthritis from my teens, and it was a great excuse to back out of things. As my illness and arthritis got worse, I got really, really depressed and withdrew, and it was and actually got to the point where I didn't know how I was gonna go on. I was admitted to hospital and started doing a program in the hospital. And one day a week, we used to, as a group, walk to the YMCA. We'd stay there for about an hour and a half and then walk back and carry on with our day. And I started to notice that on those days, my mood felt better, I had more energy, I slept better. So while I was still in the hospital, I used to go back and forth. I used to have the nurses wake me up in the morning, and before we had our breakfast and got on with our day, I used to go and walk to the YMCA, and then when I left the hospital, um, I joined, and I am now actually afraid not to exercise. Um, I, some days I don't feel like doing it, but as long as I can, I go really early and start my exercising at 4 a.m. So I'm not, I know I'm doing it because I'm out of the house and up out of my bed, and I don't really think about it. But I don't like the days that I don't go and exercise. I stiffen up really quickly. My mood is not so great. I stop worrying. I eat junk, and I, I'm an advocate for getting moving. So that's how I got started.
Carole, how about you?
My story is a little bit different than that. I have to admit that prior to being diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, I was a super active person. And so my motivation was really to get back to that feeling that I always knew. But that posed a whole different challenge because as I was diagnosed with it, I had to learn to accept what was happening, to balance out my life, to manage the pain, And that was actually, the first year was actually pretty awful. And the second year was pretty awful as well.
Yeah.
Exercise wasn't really my initial focus because I was trying to work. I was leave from work. I was literally stunned that I had gone from being an active runner to participating in marathons to being stuck where I would walk from the couch to the kitchen, stand for 10 minutes to do something, and then feel like a semi ran over me. Came back and ran over me again. So that was the beginning of my RA. And it took me, the first 6 months, I failed all the medications and then started the biologic path. So I have to admit that that first year to 2 years was really not exercise focused. But again, what that does to your mood, what that does to your sense of well-being, what that does to just how you feel about yourself in general. My huge motivation was to get back to the person I once knew. And that took a lot of effort, courage. The fatigue was undescribable, that you could be subdued from being a person that was so busy, so loving activity to, oh my gosh, I just walked for 5 minutes and my feet looked like Kubassaw. And my husband would be bringing me buckets of ice water to put my feet in, and quite a situation. But I was definitely motivated to find a place of getting back to what I once loved. And I have to admit, it's not what it used to be, but it's pretty great. I certainly have gotten back now to being pretty active. I'm not running distance like I used to. In fact, I'm not running at all, but I walk a lot. I have joined a gym. I have learned how to vary my exercise, to keep it fun, to find activity with friends. And the fun part is huge. I actually always did have that. Even when I was running, I would be the silly person taking pictures and not running as fast as I could, because that's what I loved about it. So I've just put that back into my life with my walking, the picture taking, the noticing, just the love of nature in general. And for sure, like Therese, I think the discovery of how much better you feel and just well-being, quality of life, is definitely what I would say is my motivation.
Yeah, no, I can relate to all of that. Louise, how about you?
Well, I had two little dogs that kept me walking, and virtually lazy, unmotivated exercise. Completely opposite to these two ladies. When I had the dogs, I was forced to walk every day, and that kept me mobile. And then last fall, I got lonely because I didn't have the dogs anymore and whatnot. And I saw an ad in the paper for a local recreation center that had a sit and fit program. And I thought, wow, well, this is good. I don't have to stand. I have to walk to get there, which I figured, it's about a 20-minute walk. So I figured that'd be 20 minutes each way would be extra, that walk. But I got there and the group was fantastic. The facilitators were awesome, and they really, really got me going to participating in that sit and fit. And chair is called chair yoga, I think. One of the exercises they had two facilitators, one on Tuesday and one on Thursday. And one did chair yoga and the other did other stuff, slightly different mode. But the whole thing is that during that time, I lost a pile of weight and I became so that I can more mobile. I could pick up things off the floor. And that really got me excited. And unfortunately, I had a little health glitch and I couldn't participate this last session. And boy, do I feel it, because I piled the pounds back on. I use food as a stressor thing. So yeah, it's what I'm looking for in participating today is I'm looking for some really good motivation.
Yeah.
Yeah. My internal motivation's not working.
No, I mean, I started walking at the beginning of COVID to try to get through it with my mental health because we were all so isolated and everything. And I found a walking partner once all the restrictions came off, and I walk about 45 minutes a day. So you're walking both ways to the fitness class is the same as I walk most days. I try, and the same as Therese. I don't feel good if I don't do it. Mentally, physically, it's just made such a difference. But then I also relate to Carole because I've been there where you can't. You just, your disease is so bad, you're in so much pain, your joints are so flared up that the thought of exercise is just something that's way, way beyond. You just want to get through being able to go to the bathroom when you need to. So I can relate to everything everybody says. The next questions I'm going to ask are for Manny and Allyson, and I just wonder, what do you hear as researchers and healthcare professionals about what works for people with arthritis, and maybe some ways that are accessible that don't involve a gym or fear of falling. So maybe I'll start with Manny.
That's great. Thanks for the question, Linda, and thanks for those really inspiring stories. It was great to hear the 3 different perspectives, but you all doing your own thing and making it work, and that's really exciting. So yeah, in terms of what works, I think this is actually a really complex question to unpack. So I decided I want to focus on a few things, and I think the number one thing at the end of that question you asked about making this accessible, reducing that fear. And I think the number one thing that's really, really powerful is shifting this idea from exercise, which means like this can be associated with this really high intensity. I have to go to the gym, I have to do X, Y, Z, to actually thinking about it as movement, physical activity or movement, because that can be anything. Anything you do to move your body counts as movement, and this all adds up. So I think like really shifting that mindset from like, I need to go and exercise to like, let's do some movement, let's get moving, let's move my legs, my arms, whatever I can that day. This really makes it super accessible and reduces those fears and barriers. And it also allows us to start building that momentum, right? I think I heard that in all the stories is you do a little bit of something, you feel the feedback, you feel better, or you have some good experience of making it fun with friends. And that in itself is gonna, help drive you forward. So I always like to, I think that's my most important key thing is just kind of starting with that kind of shift in mindset and starting with something small, and then you can build from there.
And Allyson, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh, sure. And thanks everyone for showing up on a Saturday afternoon for, I think a really important question in how to keep physically active. And we typically do not use the E word, as Manuel was saying, look at activity. Because I think with hearing all the stories, they're individual, very personal, and everybody had a different slant. And I think, certainly when you're looking at physical activity, it is what is meaningful for you. And so really, really important. And finding some activity because, some people like to exercise on their own and have that quietness maybe out, walking in a park. Or other people are really energized by going to a group, exercise program. So it's what's personal to you, what's meaningful to you. And it doesn't have to be going to the gym. I work in a primary care clinic, and a number of the clients I see do not have access to the gym. And, it's just kind of reassuring them. If you're physically active, so if it means that you're going, out for a walk, or if you have to house clean, that's being physically active. And doing those stairs, that's all, considered being physically active. So I think what we see in research is that there is certainly a move towards looking at physical activity and how can we break up that sedentary lifestyle. So for some people, it might mean, just kind of standing up. Some of the clients I say, okay, every time a commercial comes on, stand up and maybe go out to the kitchen and and do some things and then come on back. Or you can try, if you want to do ankle circles, but do something during those TV commercials. So, but then we also have, for example, with Carole saying her story, running marathons. And, how can you, with a person who has been very active, how can you kind of keep and if that's their goal to keep active, how can you incorporate that into your back into your life? So saying it's very personal where you're starting from, and I'll put a plug in for physiotherapy and OT and the rehab group is do talk to your therapist to find out what's best for you, and between your therapist and you can problem solve and figure out what's best for you.
Yeah,
And maybe, yeah, and oh, sorry, I'll just say, picking up on Manny, it has to be fun. You have to have laughter. So I leave it with that.
yeah, absolutely. I know I started wearing an Apple Watch a couple years ago, and I found it motivates me. It also annoys me because on days where this week there was 2 days where there was nothing but ice outside. There was no way I could walk and stay upright, and the watch kept going, "Come on now, you can do it, you can do it." And so the next day I didn't even put it on. I thought, no, I'm not going to listen to you nag at me today. I'm leaving it off. And and it doesn't always, as you said, alternate forms of exercise. And that's one thing I think the Apple Watch doesn't pick up alternate forms of exercise. It doesn't pick up housework and all this other stuff. So I think it's helpful, these wearable things, but they also have a few little limitations on them. And I guess to the next question, and I'll go in reverse order and start with Louise. I think we've already talked about some of these as well, is some of the barriers that you experience in having physical activity. I know we've kind of intertwined them already, but Louise, some of the barriers that you've encountered.
Well, this winter in Calgary, the icy streets, or for the last month anyways. I can only excuse the last month, really. Uh, but yeah, I think there's a fear, especially when you're older, that if you're to fall, you're going to break a bone. And I've had my annual break. I broke my arm twice this last couple of years, and it's just based on tripping and being clumsy. But that fear that you have inside you, it's a psychological fear that's holding you back, is one of the things that also sometimes you need motivation. And I like the idea that Allyson, you said about talking to a physiotherapist, and you really got me thinking. There is a physiotherapy group within walking distance to my house, and I should really make an appointment, maybe get an assessment done, you think, and let that help me with some of my motivation issues. So I did pick that up from you already, and it's in my to-do list. There, I got to get it down in book, but I definitely that sort of thing. So that's about all I have to say, Linda.
Yeah, and I think then you're accountable to the physiotherapist. If you get that assessment and you go back, you kind of have to say, okay, so I'm showing some improvement now because I've been doing what I'm supposed to do. So, Carole, how about you? Some of the barriers you've experienced. I know we've touched on some already, but.
I agree with Louise. The fear is definitely a thing. Anxiety goes along with that. I also have broken my wrist out of just a silly moment this past year that I wish it had been on ice or running, but it wasn't. Recovering from that, definitely seek physio help. I think finding a physio that understands rheumatoid arthritis, which I think is actually one of the barriers. It would be great if there was a list of, in Alberta, I'm right here in Edmonton. Nice to meet you, Allyson. It would be great if there were a list somewhere that people could say, okay, these are the 10 physios that really have a tight grip on managing rheumatoid arthritis. Because I I mean, I have a nursing background. I've yet to actually find that person. I did go to a program at the university that when I first was diagnosed, and they said you could come back, but it doesn't really work that way. So that's one of my anxiety pieces, is that I'm not an naturally anxious person, but I feel that when I need that help, accessing the right help at the right time to be able to conquer my anxiety and also conquer the fear to move forward. So I do have a good physio. She is in walking distance. I set myself up that way purposefully. Rheumatoid arthritis is not necessarily her thing, but she's just very holistic. A lot of times you'll go to a doctor or even a physio now, and they want you to come in with one complaint. Well, if you have rheumatoid arthritis, that is impossible. I had a hip issue at the same time I broke my wrist. At the same time, I still had rheumatoid arthritis. And I had back surgery 2 years ago. So I've done super well because I think I'm ridiculously resourceful, but it's not necessarily at the tip of anybody's finger to find who that person is. And if they don't understand, I believe they can actually make things worse. And that has heightened my anxiety when you find the wrong person that really doesn't have a grip on that. So anxiety for me is one of the things that I'm always trying to conquer. And I think I'm just going to throw in there things like insomnia. When you don't sleep well, you're not motivated to move because you're not motivated to even get out of bed. If those issues aren't tackled, pain that causes insomnia, I think it's termed painsomnia now in a lot of today's language. I think all of us that have chronic illnesses with pain associated have some degree of insomnia. Some of it's related to other things. Let's not use that menopause word, but anyhow, it's all linked. Brain fog, just not feeling like yourself, getting up in the morning, just getting up. That's like sometimes seriously challenging. And I have a lot of willpower and make myself get up. And once I get through that first hour, things are better. But I can see if you weren't highly motivated to begin with, these would be humongous challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you haven't seen the benefits of exercise, you think it's hopeless, that there's, you just can't, you can't do this, right? So
yeah, I basically push myself till I feel better, but
yeah.
I can totally appreciate that. That's not going to be the same for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And Therese, some of the barriers that you've encountered.
Walking has been difficult this last week because the sidewalks haven't been cleared, and I'm afraid of falling too. I've had broken bones in the last few years, and but on my watch was telling me too that my workouts were down by half this week. So it gets annoying that Apple Watch sometimes, but I have really bad insomnia. I have sleep apnea, centralized sleep apnea, and I wake up like several times during the night. And that's why I started working out so early, was because I was awake and couldn't get back to sleep. So, and I'm just fortunate that the people that I am around are all early birds too. So that helped, especially during the pandemic when it was the gym was closed and we weren't able to go there. But we started our outside group. Physiotherapy isn't really an option for me. I can't afford it. I don't have a drug plan at work, and we only get 6 sessions, and it has to be from something acute as opposed to chronic illness here in Ontario. So I would like to have had it, but it's really, so that's a barrier for me, is being able to have OT or physiotherapy or any of the complementary things. So that's why the gym works for me anyways. I mean, it doesn't work for everyone, but it works for me. And the fatigue is sometimes really, really bad. But I've learned that I can only do what I can do that day. I don't come down on myself. I don't stress about it. If I can't do a class, then I try something less, even if I just stretch. So yeah, but
Yeah.
just
And when I
walking.
hear you about the physiotherapy, and I notice even I've gone to physio before and told, like Carole mentioned, well, they don't do people with rheumatoid arthritis. They only handle sports injuries or different things. So, there are some barriers out there like that. And, you just kind of have to work around them, and not having insurance coverage. I don't have any insurance for physio, although I do feel I would probably be able to pay out of pocket for, 1 or 2 visits to get going if I need it or if I run into trouble. But yeah, it's unfortunate that it isn't covered, fully. If you have it in hospital, I think it's covered, but for private physiotherapy, it's hard for somebody. I'm going to go back to Manny first here, because we've had a lot of talk about, being anxious about falling. And I know there's, people have anxieties and issues and feel, is it safe for me to exercise? What if I hurt my joint, or what if I aggravate my joint, and, then, what's going to happen to me? And, am I going to have to change my medications, and all these things that go through our heads? So Manny, I know that we've had some discussions about safety and exercise, and how do people deal with that? Like they're scared, right? You have rheumatoid arthritis if you're well controlled, but if you go out and you hurt yourself, how do you tell a difference between if you've actually aggravated a joint, or maybe it's just because you haven't exercised for 6 months and your muscles are sore like a normal person would be, right? So I think some of us we know our bodies, but we need to figure out what we're going to do, and then we want to do it safely. So do you have any ideas around that?
That's a great question. Thanks, Linda. And I think yeah, my first response or thought around this is that these kind of concerns about safety are completely normal. And I think it's important to acknowledge that it's okay to have these kind of concerns, and it's good to be cautious at the beginning, especially because there are certain risks to it. But I think what it comes down to in terms of I think general safety, I'm going to come back to kind of connecting with exercise professionals or physiotherapy later. And I think we've touched on that already. But fact of the matter, I think, is that there's been a lot of different studies that have been done. There are hundreds of studies, thousands of individuals with different arthritis conditions that have gone through physical activity or exercise programs. And out of all of those studies, there's very, very few reporting of serious things that have happened. So serious adverse events, we call them, or serious problems that happened as a result of those programs. So when it's done the right way, the risk is, I would say, generally speaking, quite minimal. But at the same time, there's the muscle soreness and the other things to figure out. So I think that's where it's really important to kind of start gradually and start small to minimize that risk, listening to your body. And then it is important, of course, depending on, if you have arthritis, but you might have other conditions or other concerns, that's where, talking to whether it's a clinical exercise physiologist or physiotherapist, someone that's really highly qualified to help talk through those things with you, can be important, and can also help ease some of those worries. But yeah, I think the thing I always try to emphasize as well, yes, there is some risks to doing physical activity and risk of falls and different things, but there's also a risk to being inactive and not doing physical activity. So it's kind of a little bit of that balance, right? I think it's okay to have those fears, and it's good to talk about them and work through them and start small and do it in a way where you don't get injured or extremely fatigued right away. But also, I think it's important to recognize that doing some movement has a lot of benefits, and there's a lot of other, if you're not moving too much, there's also risks there, and there's things that are happening. So it's a little bit of a balance.
Yeah. And Allyson, I guess I'm going to ask you similar questions. So do it, around, should people come to you before they start an exercise program to just make sure that it's safe, or they talk to their family doctor first, or, before they start doing anything? If you got any advice for people who are thinking, I really need to do this, but I don't know where to start.
Yes, no, I certainly agree, is talk to your family physician. make sure, because of all the associated other conditions, comorbidities with rheumatoid or the inflammatory arthritis, make sure from a medical perspective that you're good before you start really embarking on a real serious program. But Manny was talking about balance. So just picking up on that, everybody knows, oh, it's good to do walking, strengthening, flexibility. But from a safety perspective, I'm going to throw out, you should also consider balance and coordination, because part of my research is looking at falls. And it is certainly an issue, as well as bone health. So making sure, so we don't typically use the word osteoporosis these days. We talk about bone health. And exercise is great for your bone health, but the balance component. And certainly, being here in Edmonton, and also particularly Calgary, that has that thaw and freeze, which ice is a real issue. There are ways to walk on the ice and walk outdoors during winter. There are good non-slip winter boots, so there's a lot of things that you can be proactive so that you have balance, not only with the type of exercises that you're doing, but balance when you're walking. And and one of from my research perspective, sorry, I put it in a little plug, is I'm not too aware, and perhaps people can inform me about falls prevention programs that specifically target people with arthritis. I think there are a few out there, but not near the amount that we should be giving people, or being people offering people. So I just throw that out.
And I'm just going to pick up on a couple of things. One was the sleep that was mentioned before by both Carole and Therese, the insomnia. I know when I started walking, I was having a lot of sleep issues as well. And actually the walking helped, the exercise helped with my sleep. And even now in the days that I don't walk, I have more trouble sleeping than on the days that I do walk. And then the other thing was balance. And that was the other thing. And before I started walking 4 years ago, I fell probably every 2 or 3 months. I would fall. Luckily, I never broke anything. I've had 14 total joint replacements, but I never broke anything when I fell. But I don't fall anymore. My balance and my strength has been built up in the 4 years, 5 years of walking, that my balance is so much better. I haven't fallen, touch wood, in a couple years. So those things that can also help with exercise can help with other things. And I think our next question I'm going to go to, and I know it's also been touched on, is you don't just always live with arthritis, right? We have other things going on with our bodies. And I know because Carole had mentioned, you go to the doctor and they focus on the rheumatoid arthritis, and they forget, all this other things that could be going on in the background, osteoporosis, different things. So I'm just wondering how do we manage that to keep moving when you have other health conditions, that we have. I know another patient partner who has multiple sclerosis and rheumatoid arthritis. How do you keep exercising? And I guess I'll give this one to Allyson first and then Manny. How do people exercise when they have all these other things going on, and to try to do it safely and effectively?
Yeah, and it is respecting all those those health conditions. And I think so, you mentioned MS. Well, fatigue certainly is a very important issue that you want to respect it. And then there's all other, from cardiac problems, respiratory problems. So this is where it's good to talk to your physician to find out if you are, good to go. And then having an exercise specialist be able to maybe show you the path to gradually, and what are those warning signs, and what are the signs that are okay that you can. Because I find a lot of people, for example, with pain, kind of confuse the different types of pain, and then get scared off. So there's a lot of working with a exercise specialist to figure out what's right for you. I don't know, Manny, do you want to add to that?
No, I fully agree and echo with those comments. I think the thing that now I'm just kind of reflecting on and learning from all these individuals living with arthritis, that as they share their stories and the more people you talk to, I think, like, how do you keep moving? That I think Carole, Therese, and Louise all talked about it already. You know, it's finding things, finding your motivation. Why is it important to you? What does it mean to you? And then figuring out, you know, what can you do with those different considerations. So I think there's always, it's good to have that kind of can-do attitude and that approach, and acknowledging, yes, that important, it's important to check in with health professionals and have that initial okay and safety understanding. But beyond that, I think it's starting to find little things, doing some gentle movement. And, you know, there's a lot of good evidence out there showing how you can reduce your risk of, you know, hospitalization from these different conditions, and reduce your risk of actually developing or worsening all these different chronic conditions, or a lot of them at least, from moving and being physically active. So again, I think there's that initial safety is super important, but then it's finding ways that you can, keep moving, and that's the best thing you're going to be able to do for yourself if you have those different conditions or start of them. Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm going to go back to our people with lived experience. I'm going to go Therese and then Carole and then Louise. And Therese, what keeps you moving? I think you've shared a little bit about this, but what keeps you going and keeps you moving every day?
Basically routine. It's part of my routine, which is good because I learned that actually, that most illnesses respond to routine, even depression and anxiety. And it's just knowing, it's just putting one foot in front of the other, basically. And it's down to that some days for me. I don't feel always wake up and just dive into action. Oh no, it's a gradual process. You know, the ice packs come out first, and and then off I go. And I'm not raring to go by any stretch of the imagination, but it's my routine. I get my stuff ready the night before, and all I have to do is get myself out of the door. Once I'm out and feeling the fresh air, I'm usually okay. And it's about accepting my body the way it is for that day. Because again, that changes too. So I would say that getting into the routine of it and incorporating it with the rest of my life. I work out, I shower, I go to work. So
Yeah, good for you. Carole, how about you? What keeps you going every day to do this, even though it's sometimes hard and a struggle?
I think for me, always having a plan, even though I know that plans get shifted quite often with the unexpected with RA. And I think that is also part of my plan, is knowing that I can make the best of plans, and then tomorrow it'll be like, that's not going to happen. But I have a lot of options to choose from. So I will make a plan. I will set some goals. I always like to have something to look forward to. It could be as simple as a different walk. I just love exploring different places. Sometimes that different walk in the winter in Edmonton might mean I've started walking in West Edmonton Mall, and before the mall opens on a Saturday or a Sunday, because it's empty and the sun's shining through, there's, things to look at, and you can put in a lot of steps there safely. So it's a drive to get there, but it's safe. It's you're not going to have the anxiety of falling, and I'm still going to feel better after doing that longer walk than trying to go outside. And I avoid the gym on the weekends because I have anxiety about getting some other illness, because I am immunosuppressed, which I don't think we kind of never mention that, but there's fear and anxiety always around just being immunocompromised. and that affects how you feel about going to the gym. I have also discovered one of the best things for me when I don't want to go out, because I don't know if I'm an introvert or extrovert. I think I'm an introvert. that likes to be out there doing things, and then I like to come back to myself. But at the end of the day, I love my yoga mat, and some days if I could just sit on it and go, thank you for being you. And other days I really like to just do some yoga, and sometimes just some stretching, and sometimes use some bands. So I found multiple ways to approach whatever my day brings and expect the unexpected. And that is a part of my plan all the time. I think Allyson mentioned the term "good to go." It's a great term. I love it, but you have to be able to understand how to switch that up for what good to go means today. And I'm going to just throw in the balance thing. That's not actually the act of balancing on your feet, but the act of juggling and balancing your activities, and also balancing it with rest. So that's a huge thing, is knowing when not to exercise too.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a good point, because there are times when you just can't. So you can't beat yourself up about it. And I think that's the main thing.
Yeah, those days, breathing exercises and meditation, and I just call that a different kind of movement that day.
Yeah, that's right. Still is healthy for you, right?
That's right.
Louise, what about you? What keeps you wanting to go?
Oh, I struggle with this. I'm just in a downward slump at the moment. So, again, what keeps me going, I think, is other people.
Yeah.
You get to an age and stage in your community that social isolation is your worst enemy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you sort of need that prompt. And it's much easier to walk when you're walking with somebody, not to hold your hand or not to make sure you cross the icy path balance wise, but it's definitely the social isolation issue for a lot of us that have had issues with simple walking. As I mentioned in my chat, I tripped over a speed bump, one of those little bumpy things behind one of the department stores. I did a shortcut. Then I realized, because my feet were starting to hurt me, and I figured I needed more exercise because my feet were hurting, and I looked it down and I realized I was wearing the wrong kind of shoes. I was wearing flip-flops instead of my regular walking shoes. And I was so busy concentrating on these darn flip-flops that I didn't see the speed bump. Boom. So senility, distraction, all fits in that part of exercise too. That when you mentioned there, listening to your body. Trouble is that sometimes you listen to your body and say, my body just doesn't want to get out of bed today. And that's so easily done time and time again without that extra oomph. And again, I go back to motivation. That sort of thing. Sleep, definitely been mentioned too. If you roll over a certain way and your aches and pains pop up and you're sort of, I'm awake, I might as well go to the bathroom. You do your little routine and trying to get back to go to sleep again. You have those nights where you're up 2 or 3 times a night. Okay. So I find that, how can I work? What worked for me with the last year when I was doing the senior sit and vet program was just the camaraderie of it.
Yeah.
The exercises were great and they did a lot for me. in my flexibility and whatnot. But again, it's that camaraderie.
Yeah.
That really, really motivated me to get there, to see how Albert's diet's going, or so-and-so's trip to Mexico. They just got back from Mexico, want to hear all about it, that sort of thing. But
The social aspect again, yeah. I know you touched on something about shoes, and I know that for me it's a big thing. I bought these boots that have from Mark's Work Warehouse that have that special ice effect sole on them, and I couldn't have walked the last 3 or 4 days if I didn't have those boots. They're absolutely amazing. And the thing that keeps me motivated is when we had our cardiovascular webinar last December. It scared me because I've been walking for 5 years, but when I saw that, I gotta better keep walking with the risk of cardiovascular disease and rheumatoid arthritis. So that kind of kept me going too. So that was a little bit of a scare there that kind of made me move too. So yeah, there's lots of different things I guess that can motivate us and keep us going. Lori, are we getting into the Q&A now? I can't read the chat because my eyes have
Yeah,
been
no
going
worries.
with this disease. So.
Yeah, no, I think we had one. I mean, there's lots of great ideas in the chat, but I think there was, one question from folks around kind of exercise or physical activity around surgery, right? Because as we know, like so many of us end up with some kind of surgery, whether it might be a joint replacement or something. So is there something we could do around surgery, I guess, to maybe, I don't know, maybe for Manny or Allyson might have, or maybe the others too, in terms of advice on that.
Maybe we'll start with Allyson because I know after my surgeries, the physiotherapist that I had in the hospital was just absolutely incredible, and I credit her with getting me back going and moving again. So maybe Allyson, if you could start, and then Manny.
Sure, thanks. Okay, so I do quite a work with hip and knee, and so I'll be talking more about hip and knee replacements. And certainly the research shows that if you're in the best health that you can be going in before surgery, you're going to end up at a higher level of recovery from functional recovery. So this is motivation. Now I can only speak to kind of Alberta. We have a central intake, both in, well, for the most part, in Edmonton, and some of the smaller centers, there's intake as well as Calgary. And I can put the link on. There's some exercises that they encourage people to do, and their videos that were associated with one of our research studies, and the physios at the Bone and Joint Clinic did a really nice job of these exercises. So long answer to say yes, if you can get yourself into the best of shape before surgery, you're going to end up way ahead of the game during your recovery.
Yeah, the only issue with that is we wait so long on a wait list, and sometimes you can't move and you're waiting for the hip or knee, and then you go downhill because you're in so much pain. So I guess that's with the wait list and the wait times, that is an issue. But as much as you can, I think that's perfect. Yeah, you need to do as much as you're able to do when you're in that kind of position, right? Manny, any thoughts?
Oh, I was just going to say there are certain exercises that will kind of help strengthen those muscles that we know are going to be weak. You don't feel like doing the full, meal deal.
Okay.
Very specific. Sorry, Manny.
No worries. No, I think that was, some great points. The only thing I'll add, I think, is that overall, this idea of not just rehabilitation after surgery, but prehabilitation. So doing as much as possible before surgery. This is really growing. So it's really exciting to see a little bit of a culture shift slowly there about the importance of what can we do as we're actually waiting for that period. And we know that with that wait list, there might be actually I know there's challenges, and if there's a lot of pain or other things going on, that's challenging, but there's also some opportunity there to tap into people's, motivation to do well after their surgery. So yeah, if you're approaching surgery, ask your doctor, ask your surgeon about if there's any prehabilitation type programs or if there's anything around. And I think, yeah, as Allyson pointed out, there's such a huge benefit to that. And even if it's general movement that doesn't target that area of your body, there's still benefit there in terms of how you're going to be able to bounce back and recover.
Yeah, and I know when I first started having joint replacement surgeries back in the 1998, there were very few prehab programs, and now they seem to be pretty standard right across the country. I know even in New Brunswick now we have the prehab program, so I would encourage people to take advantage of those. And then you get more information and know what to expect after surgery as well. So I'm going to go back to our people with lived experience, and I'll start with Louise this time. And just what advice would you give to somebody who's thinking about getting moving, and what should, what would be the first thing they should do?
I don't know, Manny. I'm going to need help with this one. I think it's a matter of finding out just what's available and what's available within your communities. Because a lot of, in Calgary, we're blessed with a low income bus pass that gets me all over everywhere for super cheap. However, the idea of trekking across town in winter, it's not going to happen.
No.
So I would think that if just trying to find out what's available, buddy up with somebody who is active. Just listening to you guys here, I'm beginning my little to-do list. And one of them is just definitely, calling on somebody, sort of say, walking buddy. My neighbors have a lovely little dog, and I never see it go out for a walk. So, I thinking of going back. I used to do a dog walking service way back in the day, and time to go back and get my little mutts. I don't want them in my house, but for a walk, give me something to do.
Perfect.
I can think of.
Yeah, no, perfect. Great suggestion. And the walking buddy, that's what I've done as well the last 5 years. And actually I have two, because one would be busy and couldn't do it. So I ended up having to get a backup, and they motivate you, right? Because she'll message me, we're going to walk today. Or if she doesn't message me, I'll message her, we're going to walk today. So it works both ways, right? You motivate each other. So that's a great advice. Carole, any advice from you?
I think I'm going to say knowledge is power and community is power. So get as many resources as you can, talk to people, connect with people, just connect. I think that the online resources are amazing now, because if you can't leave your home, if it's too cold, don't be afraid to reach out to a Zoom meeting, to a online exercise class. There's a lot of great exercise classes that you can actually look for people with credentials, for physiotherapists, occupational therapists, for arthritis specific exercises. And don't feel like you always have to leave your home. Maybe you want to put your own music on and just follow a video. All of us that are on here obviously have that access, and I think many more do. And then the resources. I have found I think even if I hadn't had a medical background, just digging into information. We mentioned the other illnesses that many of us have, and osteoarthritis, osteoporosis. All of those are actually part of rheumatoid, because bones just keeps on going. And it's super, super important to find a physio, or whoever your team of community people are, that will also advocate on your behalf to your physician. Because I don't think, like, we have this really nice idea that your physician is this person that's going to say, yeah, go ahead, do this. And I haven't found one that has been able to meet that credential for me. So it's really the resources that I navigate and the people like especially physios, that can also help me communicate. I always say to my physio, can you document that to my physician, please? Because then I'm not all on my own when I get there and he has 15 minutes, which became 5 because I waited 2 hours to see him. And the interest is, it's not, I'm not blaming physicians. I think that they are just overwhelmed and they do not have that extension of effort. And it's been 10 years I've been involved with the RA story, and most of the times that's not where I'm getting my go-to from. So knowledge is power.
Yeah, no, I agree. My rheumatologist was actually better than my family doctor for advice around exercise. But when you're there, there's so many other things going on. Exercise kind of falls down to the bottom, right?
I find it's more of a medication thing.
Yeah, that's right.
And is your med working? Yeah, okay, great, bye.
The blood work's good. See you later. Yeah, that's right. Therese, how about you? What advice?
Use your friends. It's not that their world would fall apart if you didn't show up, but I don't know, you have like a sense of committing to doing something, the both of you together. And I mean, when we've walked, we've had some really heart-to-heart, deep conversations, you know, and we've also solved all the problems of the world out on
We
these
need
walks. So yeah, yeah, I think having somebody who's going to walk with you, exercise with you, take a day off with you, or give you permission to take a day off sometimes. I don't know, sometimes you just need that. Yeah, community. Definitely
that's right.
community. Yeah.
That's right, especially after the last few years where everything's been going crazy. So,
Yeah.
Lori, are there any other questions that we need?
Oh, I think we're good. I didn't see anything else in the chat, so we're good to.
Okay. And I want to thank our panelists and our people with lived experience for sharing. I think that, you know, that others need to hear about our experiences and know that they can start an exercise program and can do it safely, but they also have to be gentle and kind to themselves and not, you know, let go of the guilt if there's a day you can't do it, and celebrate the days that you can. And I certainly found that, you know, it's really all about, you know, avoiding isolation and socializing and bringing some fun things with it. And you know, you can make a plan, and once you get into the habit, then it's a good habit that, you know, some of us hopefully can continue to do. At the same time, being kind to ourselves and gentle with our bodies. So thank you all very much. And we're really happy that you could join us today. And at that, we will sign off.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.